Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our pre-concert. Well, we're going to have a little chat here. I'm David Follis, and I think most of you probably know me, the artistic director of the Toronto Consort, and you know that once a season, we have a guest ensemble on our program, on our series here, where we try and bring you some of the best of early music from around the world. You can remember the groups that we've had over the years, and we're so pleased this time to be welcoming a group which is based in Holland, but the members come from Belgium and Holland and France and Texas and Israel and all sorts of places.
Toronto.
And Toronto, yeah, that's right, called Cappella Pratensis. But it's such a pleasure to welcome them because this is Stratton Bull, who is their director. But some of you, I don't know how many of you, remember that Stratton sang a whole season with the Toronto Consort. Back how long ago, Stratton?
1986, something like that.
1986. Yeah. And someone was saying the other day, they were talking about this program, and they said, oh yes, Stratton Bull, whatever happened to him?
Great.
You know, like you get in those back pages of the Hollywood magazines, whatever happened to so-and-so? Yeah. Stratton married and moved to Europe and has got associated with Cappella Pratensis and is now its director and has had a wonderful career leading Cappella Pratensis, and Stratton maybe can tell us a little more about what he does. But we also sang in the Gents. Some of you, anybody here remember the Gents? It was a male, there we are, a few diehards, a male sextet, kind of a King Singers ripoff, remember?
Yeah. No, I think they copied us.
That's it, anyways, it's going to be a wonderful evening, and Cappella Pratensis does some very specialized repertoire, although it's repertoire which perhaps shouldn't be quite so specialized because it's an unbelievably important repertoire and very beautiful. And so to introduce things, I thought I would just ask Stratton, if you don't mind, the first question. This is this picture that we've used as a kind of publicity, and it's on the front of your programs, and it looks to me like it's by that artist Hieronymus Bosch. What's the connection with Bosch and the music that we're going to hear?
Right. Well, there's a bunch of different connections. It's a very interesting story. First of all, our group is based in the Dutch city of 's-Hertogenbosch, also known as Den Bosch or Den Bosch. And Hieronymus Bosch, his name was actually Jeroen van Acker, but he was from the town of Den Bosch, so he changed his name to Hieronymus Bosch, just to reflect, I'm from this famous town. And we're from that town too. We're based, it's in the south of Holland, in the province of Brabant. So that's a first connection. The other thing is last year was, you may be aware, the 500th anniversary since the death of Hieronymus Bosch. And you can imagine in our part of the world, in that particular city, they made a big deal. There was a fantastic exhibition with practically all his paintings and lots and lots of activities connected to Bosch, which we were also involved in. We sang at the opening with the king there and TV and all kinds of things, and it was quite a festive year. But we also put together this program to make the musical connection to Hieronymus Bosch, and it turns out there's some pretty interesting musical connections. One is just in a very general sense. There's a lot of music in his paintings. Like this one. Well, a little secret, it's not actually by Bosch, but it's the school of Bosch. There's a lot of different painters that took up his style and something of a studio, people who followed him. And he does have a picture, I'll show you later, of singers in an egg. It's known as the concert in the egg. So this is very directly from Bosch. And you find music in various of his other paintings. I'll show you a bit in a minute. So in a certain way, his paintings are very auditory. I mean, if you could hear the sound that was coming from the paintings, especially the groanings of monsters in hell and all kinds of devilish instruments. In this case, here's a bunch of singers grouped around one music book. And they don't look like a very savory gathering.
And one of the guys looks like he's playing a shawm or a recorder or something.
Right, so that's going to be loud. And often, well, I guess it can be good, shawm. And then there's someone's got a harp. There's some kind of devil down there playing a lute underneath, and a monkey playing a cornetto or something. Not to mention all kinds of sounds coming from behind, fires burning and whatnot. So there is this musical quality to his paintings. I mean, his paintings are very rambunctious, busy paintings anyway. I mean, there are tons going on. That's a feature of Flemish painting in general. They're incredibly complicated paintings. So that's not only in Bosch, but he's got something to say about music, and we'll also get to that later. I mean, there's another aspect, another connection you can make that's quite general, and that's the whole concept of polyphony. And in a certain way, his paintings are also very polyphonic. And what does that mean in more than just a kind of general sense? Well, what's polyphony? Polyphony means simultaneous melodies. Yeah. So, I mean, we're used to thinking of music as somebody sings a song and then some instrument plays some chords to accompany them. Well, this is not really like that. This is 4 songs being sung at the same time, and through the miracle of counterpoints, it actually sounds good. All the voices fit together, and that's not a kind of music that's only found in this period. In fact, in a certain sense, all Western music is polyphonic. It's the basic characteristic of European music is that it's polyphonic. There are different melodies. Even just the bass against the soprano is already polyphony. But it's this idea of simultaneous songs. And in his paintings, they're also polyphonic in the sense that there are simultaneous storylines going on, the most famous being the Garden of Earthly Delights. You probably can imagine a little bit, if I say that, you may know the painting. But there is a lot going on. I mean, the polyphony of heaven, earth, and hell, just to begin with, that triptych, by the way, the name of our program. But also within that, many, many different stories going on. These guys doing their music, but then somewhere else there's people cavorting one way or another, and there's other people going up to heaven, other people going down to hell. And so there, if you compare that to Madonna and Child by Raphael, which is just one woman with a blue cloak on and one baby here and one tree, and it's just this incredibly clear but exquisite image. And then you think of these Flemish things, very busy, very polyphonic. There's something in the Flemish attitude to art in every way. Think of also Gothic, flamboyant Gothic, incredibly ornate and complicated, very, very fine and very, very busy. So the music is like that too. This music came from that part of the world. That was really the home base, and was taken out all over Europe from the Low Countries. So there's something specific or generally connective between polyphony and these paintings.
Would Bosch have heard this kind of music?
Absolutely. So Bosch is an interesting guy. He lived in this city of 's-Hertogenbosch and never left it. I mean, he didn't go to Italy as many of these people did. He lived in a middle-sized commercial town, and he grew up there. And he was a member of a confraternity devoted to the Virgin Mary. And they had services in their chapel in the cathedral.
What's a confraternity? What does that mean?
A confraternity is a paraliturgical organization.
A paraliturgical organization.
That's just wanted you to know.
I still don't know what it is.
You still don't know what it is, right? Yeah. Well, you'd have a church with its structures, with priests and acolytes and ecclesiastical. But within that, you had devotional organizations that offered people the chance to worship. Often the Virgin Mary. There were various objects of devotion: the Virgin Mary, the Holy Cross, various saints. And
these people would just get together and...
Right, and they often paid to be a member of it. So these organizations gathered money, and you paid for the goodness of your soul, and then you were part of the club. And these organizations then had money to do things, to put on lavish services, and sometimes, as in the case of this one, to form very high-quality musical ensembles, singers singing chant and singing polyphony.
Would they hire singers, as it were?
Yeah, absolutely. It was really professional gigging. These singers, and the singers traveled from city to city looking for good jobs, and they'd come in, they'd sing, and they'd get. There was even a sort of point system. If you sang Vespers on a Tuesday night, you got 2 points, but if you sang high mass on a Sunday morning, you get 10 points. And at the end of the month, you came, and we actually have the account books. You know, this singer came in and cashed in his points and got this amount of money. So it's a bit like the singers here in Toronto rushing around from church to church on a Sunday, seeing how they can supplement their income.
So these confraternities would pay them to put on services in honor of the Virgin Mary, for instance.
That's right. That's right. So, and the funny thing about these services were, in a funny way, you can call them the beginning of our concert practice. I mean, there were, for instance, every Wednesday night there was a special Marian service, and where there were some motets and some chant and a couple of prayers, but people knew that there was music in them, and you could go to them, and of course you went with a religious intention, but we have descriptions of people saying, I'm going to go and listen, I hear they're going to be singing this motet tonight, I want to go and hear that.
And could anyone go, or just members of the confraternity?
No, it was just
This was
open.
part of their outreach to the community.
Right, they were services in the cathedral, and so here I got a picture of the cathedral here, so this is the cathedral in 's-Hertogenbosch.
This is the church where Bosch, in the city where he lived.
Yeah, and you can't see it in this picture actually, but there's a side chapel just on the other side of the high choir, which was their personal chapel, and they had all their services there. He
was a member of the confraternity.
Right.
So surely he went to some of their events.
Absolutely. It can only be that he would have, gone into that service. And even more, he made artwork for the chapel that they did. So there are two famous paintings of St. John. There's St. John on Patmos, and there's also St. John the Baptist. And they're part of a very elaborate altar triptych. That's really where we got a name from, that he made for the chapel of the confraternity. And this confraternity had sworn brothers. They were the insiders who lived there and were really part of it. And then they also had a huge European network of members who paid a little bit to be part of that organization, and again, for the good of their soul. This was this sort of, again, a kind of point system for trying to get yourself out of purgatory as quickly as you could, basically.
So is tonight's program almost like one of these Wednesday night services?
Basically, yeah. In this case, it's a votive mass for the Virgin Mary. In this particular case, it's about the nativity of the Virgin is the feast that's being celebrated.
Her birth.
Yeah.
Not Christ's nativity.
Right. Yeah. And so this concert tonight is kind of an evocation, a reenactment of that particular Marian.
And are you following? Do we still have programs, or did you create knowing the kinds of things that went into an evening like that?
Right. Well, we know the shape of the mass, so we were able to do that. I mean, you have the mass ordinaries, they call it the Kyrie, Gloria, Credo, Sanctus, Agnus Dei, and then you have the propria, the psalms that go in between the introits at the beginning, Graduale, Alleluia. So we know how those things fit together, but there's a couple of interesting things, like, for instance, we're singing a sequence, which is a special hymn-like musical piece in chant, which was for special feasts. There was a whole series of sequences through the year. And we know from the books, they have the books of music are still preserved in this confraternity. That
the books are still exist.
Yeah, well, this is a great thing about this whole thing. This confraternity still exists. In fact, next year they're celebrating their 700th anniversary. It's one of the oldest in Europe. And they still have their sort of headquarters. I can show you that. Next to the cathedral. This is actually a 19th century. It's neo-Gothic because the original medieval one fell down. But they are right next to the cathedral, and it's still an organization. It's actually kind of interesting. When Holland, the religious wars ended and the Protestants won, basically, this was a very Catholic city. They kind of cut a deal and said, well, we'll keep the organization alive, but we'll make it 50-50 Protestant and Catholic, which you can imagine in the 17th century that was not a normal thing to do.
Radical
it's actually the oldest ecumenical organization in the world because and it still is. There's 25, all guys, I'm afraid, but 25 Catholics and 25 Protestants.
And they have a library where some of this music has been preserved since that time.
Right. and this brings us a little bit to what we do with Cappella, but we sing from these original sources. We'll talk about it in a minute. But indeed, these musical books, it's quite unusual that the musical sources that were made for the confraternity are still owned by the confraternity. And they have, in this building here, they have a sort of little museum. And here it is. They've got all their books on display there. So these are the choir books here down, and one of them I can't really see is the one that we're going to. Well, we're actually singing from 2 or 3 different ones tonight on the program. So there are these beautiful big books with illuminated initials through them, and some very funny pictures drawn into them.
Maybe you can explain then what's here on your other side,
right?
Because I see that big piece of music there. I don't know if you can see it there, but it looks very different, but you can see a big illuminated letter probably. That's a reproduction of something that's maybe in that picture practically, is that right?
Yeah, it's one of those books, pages out of one of those books, which has been digitized. That's the new great thing, that these images are now available on the internet. So for groups like ours, it's fantastic. So this is, for instance, a book, this is Gregorian chant, and the beautiful color images available on the internet. And I've got another one on the other side. Which is, you can see it a little bit here, but also very beautiful, ornate, illuminated K of the Kyrie. And I can show you that here as well, and you can get maybe a better look at it. So there's that opening page, and
this is the music you're going to be singing tonight.
That's right. This is the Missa Cum Jucunditate. There it is above. And it says Cum Jucunditate Rue, and that's Pierre de la Rue. He's the composer. And by the way, he was also a member of the confraternity. He was one of the outside members, but he actually had a pre-band. He had a job at a church near Den Bosch, and he would have been there. So it's pretty likely that he met with Hieronymus Bosch. These are 2 artists that would have known each other. So there's a connection there. The other thing, if you want to connect to Bosch, but I mean, look at this guy here. Looks like he could have come out of a painting by Bosch. So there's a real direct connection between the paintings, the visual of the paintings, and the visual of the music. And we're not used to the idea of music having a visual, but you know, in the medieval idea, all things are one. So something, if it's going to sound beautiful, it should look beautiful. That's a normal thing. And nowadays we print music in a very kind of neutral, very rational, clinical way. But there they wanted to make it beautiful. The notes are also beautiful, and it's very functional. I mean, that guy is singing Kyrie, right? He's got his mouth open, and there it comes. It comes right out. The music is right there.
In fact, he looks a bit like you. Do you sing that?
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Now, this has obviously been beautifully hand illuminated. Is the music? Is it also done by hand, or is it published, printed?
It's all hand done. These are manuscripts. These are the last flowering of the manuscript culture. There was, of course, this huge medieval thing. And it's not that manuscripts haven't gone on. People still make manuscripts. But the first music was being published also right around this time. So there's this funny thing that happens as music, the music manuscript tradition dies out. It kind of has the last burst of flowering, and in a way it makes sense. I mean, if you can print it, that's very useful. Why would you then have a manuscript? It's to be something special, something that printed music can't do.
And it's so big. I mean, these pages are big.
Right.
And why are they so big?
Well, so that brings us to what we're going to do tonight. In our group, we're slightly crazy, and that is we perform it the way they performed it. Maybe it's not so crazy. And that is, when people sang this kind of music in church, so religious music, they sang grouped around one big old music stand, just like this, with big notes, big enough that a group of, between 4 or 8 or say 12 people could read from it together. And what you get, and I can show you on this, maybe it's a bit easier than on the real one, But you have, this is a part here, this whole part, that's the soprano part, and then underneath is the tenor part. And on the other pages here, it's the same thing, the alto part and the countertenor part.
So it's not like a traditional modern score where you have the soprano and then the alto and then the tenor and then the bass. You have all of the soprano part at the top of this page.
Right. So it's a different experience as a singer. When you sing for modern music, you can see what the other guys are doing, and if you lose your place, then you can kind of relate to what you see, or if you don't know what your first note is, you can see, oh, the tenor has a G, I have a G, so I'll just take that over. Here, if you lose your place, good luck to you. And so we try not to do that.
Me looking kind of at first glance, but presumably, so you've got, and then on the opposite page is like this is a book, so you've got two pages, and this is only one. On the opposite page are what, the alto part and the bass part?
The alto part and the tenor part. So it's an interesting, for people who are into books, it's quite interesting. Most books, you go here and here, you turn the page, you go here to here. With music, every opening is one event, right? That's one whole piece of music. There's 4 voices, and they're individual voices, each with their own zone.
But therefore, the page turns are coordinated.
Yeah. Yeah, the guy who wrote out the music had to figure out a place to turn the page so that everybody turned at the same time. Otherwise, you're in trouble.
And it looks to me like there's a lot more music of the soprano, and then the tenor at the moment, anyways, has a lot less.
Right.
Is that, am I right, or how is that working?
Why is that? Well, because the tenor's singing longer notes, and which often the tenor is the tenor's kind of the drives the bus, it's like the axis around which is the piece is made, and often the tenor sings long notes and the other people have a lot of busy notes. So that's quite interesting in terms of our modern scores, where everything is moving at the same rate. I mean, it's parceled out in the same amount. And here the tenor can be put in quite a compact space. Right,
and now in some of the music that we've done, the tenor also has a sort of a plain song tune or melody or something. Is that the case here?
Yes, absolutely. So this mass is called Cum Jucunditate, and there's a chant that begins with those words, and the chant goes Cum Jucunditate. And if you take a look at the tenor, there it is. Dee, pom, 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 pom. And here it is again. Dee, dum, pom, 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 pom. And here it is again. Dee, da, da, dee, da. And here's again. Dee, da, da, dee, da, da. Oh, and one more time. Dee, dee, da, 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 da. And guess what? They do that for the whole mass. It's unbelievable.
But it looks like it's not the same rhythm, so they do have to keep awake.
That's right. It's actually quite playful. And they do sing it. They sing it on another pass, some pitch. Dee, da, 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 da. It gets really exciting at a certain point. It's what they call an ostinato mass, meaning it's obstinate. It's this thing that just keeps coming back at you. And there are some other examples of masses like that. And listen for it in the concert. It's quite fun. The tenors are just doing this game, but indeed they're playing with the rhythm of the thing. Every single presentation of it is different rhythmically.
Right. So you have the mass and you have all the elements of it. And how many are there in the group?
So we've got 8 guys in the group.
And is that typical? We think a group of singers at that time might have been around that size?
You certainly see pictures with 8 singers quite often, or 10 or whatnot. Sometimes you see maybe 6 guys and then a whole gaggle of choir boys in the front. So the boys sometimes sang the toppest line. But we know that falsettists, it was pretty clear that, or men who could sing high, sang the top lines as well in certain situations. I think on a Tuesday night, when they couldn't find people, they'd just get 4 singers together, and for a big Easter service, maybe they had more. Or we know if the emperor met with the choir of some cathedral and they had a joint thing, they might have had 30, 40 singers in some form or other.
Now, with 8 singers, I suppose you don't really need a conductor in the sense that, like a modern choir, you have 30 singers and they're usually standing there in front of you and they have a conductor to keep them all together. But it must be tricky this is like when you have your own part like this, it reminds me of orchestral players. The violinist playing in the orchestra, they just have the violin part in front of them, mostly so that they don't have to, like if they had the whole score of a Beethoven symphony, there'd be so many page turns, and you can't turn your page while you're playing the violin, right? Or playing the oboe. So it's evolved for that. So this is more like that.
Yep.
But how do you keep it together?
Yep.
Like you don't see the other part right underneath your part, like in a modern score.
But there's a beat. And there's a metrical structure, so that it's like modern, people who are into music. It's 4/4 time. There's 4 beats in a bar. There are metrical units, and there's a guy who's giving the beat through the whole thing. So it's not a free-for-all.
How do we know that? There's a guy. What do you mean there's a guy giving?
We have descriptions in treatises about how to conduct, and they talk about you should move your hand like this when you conduct, up and down. So we know that somebody was giving a beat of some sort. And we also have pictures of ensembles, and you can see one guy with his hand doing something. So there's quite clear. But what's interesting is that guy's also singing. So
not just
he's not standing in front with the white gloves and the flowing white hair, and doing this. And it seems clear he's not doing expressive this kind of conducting.
He'd have his, and it is always he, I guess.
Actually, there were women's monasteries,
I see, of course, yes,
convents where they sang, where there were only women, and there's a whole tradition of women's music.
Yes.
But women and men together, you wouldn't encounter that.
But if they are whoever is leading, they are also responsible for singing. So you probably don't want to get too expressive.
Right. Yeah. I get bugged all the time by my guys about that. It's like, you're not together with your own beat. Would you attempt to? So it's a little bit of a challenge, but it changes the dynamic because it means the conductor. Well, you know about it in your group. You do that too, right?
Yeah, but we've never done it so close together. When you're going to be. I mean, if you can all have to read from this thing right here now, you're going to have to be quite tight.
Yeah. That's how they did it, and it changes the dynamic. You are quite tight with the other guys, as opposed to being, how choirs are often sort of spread out in a long row, and that creates a different sort of dynamic. But it just so happens this is the dynamic that they had. I mean, we're getting quite close to their performing world.
You'll be singing so that it'll feel more like you're singing with each other than singing to us.
There's an aspect of that. By the way, you'll notice there's this big obstacle between you and us. I mean, so there's the music. I always think the music goes this way, and the audience goes with it. It's not like singing a song to the audience. That's not how church music is conceived. So it's a different concept, and it's not made for concerts, to be honest.
Although you say it almost was a concert, but you weren't listening in the same way, perhaps.
Yeah. It's sort of, you take it both ways.
Right.
So.
Well, it's now 7:30, so this means that we need to close. I'm sure we could go on and talk about other things.
I just wanted to show you one thing. This is my pet theory.
Yes.
So we had this picture of these guys in the egg here. It's not actually by Jeroen Bos, but there is this picture, which is probably by him, or at least parts of it are by him. And this really is, again, here's these guys all singing from this one book. Here's a fool in the background being a goofball. And again, a pretty motley crew, which says something about what he thought about music making, but we can get into that later. But so that guy in the middle, here's a picture of Hieronymus Bosch from the 16th century. This funny guy, wide-set eyes, kind of straight mouth, long nose. We don't know for sure that it's him, but it's generally considered to be a likeness. And there's also this other picture this comes from the Garden of Earthly Delights, is known as the Tree Man. He's kind of walking along with a huge construction on his back. And there's been a lot of speculation about whether this also might be him. Again, these wide-set eyes, the long nose, the kind of flat mouth. And then if you look at this picture, you've got this guy in the middle here. And the funny thing about him is everyone else is really singing, and he's got his mouth closed. He's not singing. He's just not a singer. But he's got the wide-set eyes, he's got the funny nose, the straight mouth. It's a pretty rough picture.
It looks like he might not even be looking at the book.
Right. He's just, he doesn't even know what notes do, right? So this is my secret theory.
So maybe he'll be in the middle of your group tonight in spirit.
Absolutely.
Hieronymus Bosch will be here.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, thank you very much, Stratton. It's been really wonderful.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
And we're in for a rare treat. This is, as I said, unfortunately music which is so rarely heard today, so it's wonderful that they're able to bring it in straight from the original sources, as you can see, and coming even from the town where Pierre de la Rue and Bosch lived and worked. As you know, at this point, we need to have you moved back to your original seats now, and then patrons can sit where their assigned seat is. So enjoy the evening. We'll see you later.